Good evening, gentlemen. Today we're going to be looking at the rise of the Greek city-states. Now, within this portion of Greek history, we'll be looking at the rebuilding of Greece following the Dark Ages, and then we will be moving into the Classical Age of Greece. Now, this is just an example of what we're looking at with ancient Greece. Not only we have the Greek peninsula, we also are looking at Asia Minor, or Turkey, present-day Turkey, and then the islands throughout, because the Greek culture spread throughout this area and had great influence on this area. Now, the Dark Ages are following a time period with the Minoan and Mycenaean, where they dominated the Mediterranean, especially from the island of Thera, where you have the Palace of Knossos and the great culture that comes out of there. When we looked at the Minoan, who did not have walled cities, supposedly they had advancements as far as flush toilets. So they were highly advanced, and then all of a sudden you have the catastrophic volcanic eruption and then nothing. So this period, which are known as the Dark Ages of the Greek culture, you have literacy disappearing, you have trade declining, and you have mass emigration. People are moving all throughout, trying to look for those resources and that new land that they can then start anew on. Now, 750 begins what is called the Archaic Age. This is where they're borrowing heavily from the civilizations around the Mediterranean, specifically the Phoenicians. And of course, talking about the Phoenicians, they're just looking about trade. They don't really care who you are, as long as you have some goods that you could trade with them. They'll trade with you. So because of this, they're borrowing heavily from the Phoenicians. They're coming in contact with the Phoenicians, and they're borrowing heavily from the civilizations that they're coming in contact with. So you have religion. Gods are now being taken and made their own words and alphabet. The Phoenician alphabet has a great impact on the Greek alphabet. You also have the stories of Homer, the Iliad, and the Odyssey. Watch out for that Trojan horse. They're now being told again and telling of and holding the great values of the Greeks within those stories. You now also have the establishment of individual city-states because of the geography of Greece. It's very mountainous. Those city-states are now settling within the valleys, and because of those mountains, it's difficult to trade easily. So they are now developing their own identities and identifying themselves as their city-state, not as Greek as a whole. And because of the terrain, you now have unique features within cities, such as an acropolis, which is that high city. The most famous, of course, being in Athens. And then you have the Agora, which is the market below, the flat surface. So you now have this new development and these new features popping up in these city-states, or the polis. And then colonization, they're moving. The Greeks are carrying this culture throughout the Mediterranean, and they're colonizing, especially on that coastline of present-day Turkey. Also during this time, they're borrowing coinage from the Lydians, so they're getting an idea of a common currency, which is going to benefit them in trade. You have the development of the Pan-Hellenic Games. The Pan-Hellenic Games are the 4 games that are celebrating the culture of Greece. So you have not only athletic events, but you have dance, music, theater. It's a celebration of that culture. The Panhellenic Games were made up of the Nemean, the Pythian, the Isthmian, and the Olympic. And each game was in honor of a specific god. Zeus and Poseidon are two examples of those gods that they would be honoring during those games. You also have the establishment of the hoplite. The hoplite is the citizen soldier. Because the soldiers were needed for protection of those individual city-states, this now allows for equality within that city-state. So this is known as the hoplite revolution, where you have all the men fighting together to protect their city-state, and that now gives them rights within that city-state. This also helps create a new fighting style, which is known as the phalanx. The phalanx is unique because all men had to work together. Your shield did not protect only you, but it also protected the man next to you. So he had to trust you. So this really created a strong bond among the men of the Greek city-states, which then carried over into the politics. And then, of course, you have the tyrants. Tyrants were not necessarily bad men. It's given a negative connotation nowadays, but they were men who took power by force, because during the Dark Ages, you have monarchs that are established, but then they're overthrown, and oligarchies are then the dominant government structure. And constitutions. The Greeks love their constitutions. They believe also that a constitution can be changed because they're written by men. So if a oligarchy is not doing its job, or it's becoming a little bit too polluted with the aristocrats, a tyrant would take over and sometimes do the right thing and right the ship, and then that would then allow the process to restart again. And we'll look at that a little bit more when we talk about their political philosophy. Now, the two city-states we're going to be focusing on are the Spartan and the Athenian. The Spartans down there in the Peloponnesus, and the Athenians are dominating Attica. So beginning with Sparta, they really take up the idea of the hoplite, or also known as the equals, all men that were citizens of Sparta. Sparta is in constant warfare along the Peloponnesus, trying to dominate that area spread out, and they are in a constant battle with the Messenia, which are to the west of them. These Messenia end up becoming what were known as helots, or slaves. Now, because of the Spartan expansion, it eventually happens that the slaves outnumber the Spartans, and this creates a lot of tension. There is a great slave revolt that takes several years to put down, and this is one of those catalysts to the Spartans developing that militaristic culture that we identify them with. They also help establish what's called the Peloponnesian League. The members of the Peloponnesian League are members of the Peloponnesus, but it doesn't also hurt that the Spartans are dominating them, so of course Sparta becomes the leader of this Peloponnesian League. And there you go, there's Sparta right there, as King Leonidas is pointing out. Now, the Spartans, like many civilizations that we looked at, they draw their lineage back to mythical beings, and this is the Spartan family tree, and as you can see, they derive their lineage from Hercules. And I highlighted it also because this is going to come in play a little bit later when we talk about Alexander the Great, because the Macedonian kings also claim to have that tie with Hercules, to be descendants of Hercules. But of course, they being the descendant of Hercules, you're also drawing your lineage right back to Zeus. And we'll talk about this when we go over the religion and why they would want to be linked back. Now, with the Spartan lifestyle, before Lycurgus, the Spartans lived a very lavish lifestyle. They loved their luxuries, which nobody really associates Sparta with luxuries, but that is because of Lycurgus. Lycurgus comes in and establishes reforms that turn Sparta from that lavish lifestyle to the militaristic city-state that we know today. Now, Lycurgus, the lawgiver, the legend is that he saves the king, Charlios, who was going to be killed by his own mother after she proposed to Lycurgus that after she killed her unborn son and her husband, that she and Lycurgus get married and then run Sparta together. So Lycurgus saves the boy, takes him after his birth, wanders around the Mediterranean, visiting many city-states, seeing how they run, and returns several years later, places King Charlios back on the throne, but then points out to the Spartans that their lifestyle is going to end up killing them and that they must change. And this is where you then have what is called the tale of the two puppies. The Spartans are a little hesitant at the time. They laugh him out of the court. So supposedly he comes back with two puppies. He tells the king to take care of one puppy, treat it as good as he possibly can, give it food from the table, give it a bed, give it all the luxuries that he could provide, while Lycurgus then takes the other puppy, throws it outside. It has to kill its own food. It has to get used to the elements. And they then return a couple months later, and Lycurgus puts his puppy down, and it's very lean, strong, mean, and King Charlios' puppy is chunky, not too spry, and Lycurgus' puppy then kills the king's puppy. So he then says, because of that lifestyle, they have to change, and he uses it as a teaching point. That then establishes the lifestyle, and I highlighted the milestones on the side. You're responsible for finding out what happens at each of those milestones, but pretty much during the Spartan lifestyle, it's all about competition. Okay, you are competing constantly from the time you're born with everyone else in society, and that competition causes them to become stronger. This little quote that I placed down here, you can read it on your own, but this kind of gives you the mindset of the Spartans and what they held as a value. Now, Spartan women, they were just as tough as the men. They trained right alongside the men. Since the men were at the barracks constantly, they walked freely, and they were responsible for running the house and also taking care of many of the things within society. They had more freedom than the women of Athens, and that's one other thing that we're going to be looking at, is the comparison between the women of Athens and the women of Sparta. The always poignant farewell from a Spartan woman to her husband, or also mother to her son: come back with your shield or on it. Now, this could give you an idea of the Spartan mindset, but something that we have to look at. What does this say about the Spartan culture, and especially Spartan women? And the Spartans were not known for their temples and great structures. Okay, their structures were the barracks and their bodies. So they spent a lot of time perfecting those two things. So Thucydides points out how people saw the Spartans, and you could take a moment, pause this, read this, so that you can get a better idea of how people looked at them. But when it came to Sparta, they didn't really have a whole lot of temples. And something to think about, does this impact the way that we see the Spartans when we compare them with the Athenians, and where we place them comparable? The Spartan government was very unique. You had a dual monarchy. One king would share responsibilities. While one king was away at war, the other one stayed back at home, which allowed for stability. You had the Gerousia, the men over 60. Now, if you could make it to 60 in this lifestyle, you were doing pretty well, and you had a right to be high up within the government. You then also have ephors, the 5 teachers responsible for supervising education and conduct. And then the apella, all the men over 30 now had a say within government. So their government is very unique, and we'll see the influence of their government on future government. Now with Athens, quickly, the Athenians, the legend is they draw their lineage back to a competition between Athena and Poseidon. Zeus says, who could provide the greatest gift for the area could then lay claim to it. So Poseidon provides a saltwater spring, and Athena plants an olive tree. I'd say she wins because I don't want to drink a saltwater spring. So she provides something that they all can use. It's a thoughtful gift because she is the goddess of logic. She then receives the town, and that is where Athens then draws its name. Now, with the Agora, this is the central business and religious center. This is where a lot of the life occurred within Athens. You have the markets down in here, and then you have the Acropolis, which held many of the temples on that high city. And again, drawing back to those other civilizations, why would they place their temples up high, and the similar structure? And again, these modern day pictures of the Acropolis and the Agora, what we will see today. So your assignment for tonight, and also looking at tomorrow, and we'll be discussing tomorrow, we're going to be comparing the elements of the city-states of Athens and Sparta. And the question is, which city-state would you prefer and why? So we'll talk about that tomorrow. Have a great night.